Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to a brand new episode of the TechnoSpace podcast series. So, in this podcast episode, I'm very much honored and thrilled to welcome our guest, Mr. Stephen Martin, who happens to be the cloud solutions consultant of RapidScale company, and he's based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, the United States of America. Now, shedding a light about RapidScale company, it's a company that's completely into the IT services and IT consulting. Having said that, their main objective is to keep the innovations easy by bringing the best solutions to keep the technology platforms responsive and generating consistent results that the business requires. So, Stephen, it gives me a huge pleasure and honor to welcome you to this podcast initiative, and I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation with you through this medium. So, how are you, and how are things in North Carolina? I believe you're still having that Christmas kind of feel going on there, I believe.
Yeah, it's well, North Carolina's pretty warm right now. It's a little cloudy and things are picking up, but everything's going well. And we're getting excited for the spring, and hopefully it'll be a warm one for sure.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, here the situation in Hyderabad is like, the temperature has just risen and it's just giving the indication that, the summer is approaching. And I feel that, summer has already approached at a very early time.
Oh man, I
Yeah,
I can't even imagine how hot it can possibly get in Hyderabad.
it's really, really bad, with respect to the weather. But now this is just the
Yeah,
beginning. I mean, once March and April approaches, the weather is just going to go all over the place. So that's for sure.
all right.
Yeah.
So, where would you like to start today?
So, Stephen, like I'm really like very much keen to know about this. So, Stephen, like in your experience, can you just give me a deep insight about
Mhm,
the software sales, the SaaS sales, and
mhm.
that you have done that you were involved with in connection with different different multiple 2000 Fortune companies. So, how did that go
Yeah.
about?
Yeah, I think the main difference when we look at Fortune 2000 companies versus other companies is it's almost entirely based around how integratable everything is in their tech stack. Everything has to fit together. They're trying to get rid of any sort of issues or burrs or streamlines in their process. The APIs need to be seamless. And all of that is because everything is 100% predicated on the results that they're trying to drive, and they have to make a business case for any new SaaS technology that's coming on board. If they can't, then the technology department has no justification for moving forward with anything that they're bringing into the line if it doesn't line directly up with the business goals and objectives.
Got it, got it. So, like, I mean, what are the policies that the technology department looks into?
Mhm,
Like, suppose if there is any kind of a shortage that's going on.
mhm. So, what are the technologies that they're looking into? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's been a huge drive in taking on technologies that are oriented around security, that are looked at in terms of enabling end users or enabling the clients of the company themselves. That's where they're really looking for those advances in technology. As we've seen the rise of artificial intelligence, machine learning, large language models, what we're seeing is that the realization that the amount of work doesn't equal the results of work is driving a shift into how people look at technology. Is it time to onboard another tool, or is it time to consolidate and streamline and eliminate? And so I think this leads to some confusion in terms of technology adoption because companies don't know if they're going to be going more towards the reduction of costs or more towards the increase in performance.
So I'll ask it from your end, Stephen. Like, what would you look
Sure.
at? The reduction of cost or the former?
Yeah, I think that's where people get caught in a dichotomy that isn't real. If you can improve performance, you're going to reduce cost. But if you can improve performance while you're consolidating, then you're going to see both benefits working in tandem. So the ideal situation is the in medicine they refer to it as the minimum effective dose. And I think we're going to start seeing the minimum effective dose of technology.
Got it, got it. That's a great way of putting it across. So now now we'll just talk about the advancement. So in this ever-changing, evolving technological world, we have seen
Mhm.
there's a quick rise in advancement in technology. But having said that, do you think the employees and the end users are able to adapt to such a transition in a quick span? Like, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me because it's not just adoption, it's also capacity. And we've seen that there is an increase in the need for tech professionals, but not necessarily an increase in the depth of tech professional capability. So we're seeing a lot more generalists than we are specialists, and a lot more smaller IT teams, especially based off the past 5 years, where the reduction in staffing has been occurred in IT. So now we're seeing big giant goals with these companies and looking at the new technology and looking at onboarding it, and there's not enough capability, certifications, or capacity in the IT departments to enable all of it. So I think we're going to see an interesting shift in IT moving from a cost center to a profit center, and IT staffing moving from just looking at putting warm bodies in front of a problem and looking at how deep are the certifications that we're looking at here. Can we find some specialists in a world of generalists? And I think that's the future for the rise of technology.
Impressive. That's good to know, Stephen. But Stephen, now, I mean, you were talking about, you're having a technological team, you're having a team that's, working on a project. But when you're
Yeah.
hiring someone in a team, do you consider, the person having multiple certifications, or do you consider the person, having a great experience in a CV? Like, what are the things that you would look at mainly?
Yeah, so if that person survives the applicant tracking system in the first place and they get in front of a human being, the reality of it is when you're looking at this person's credentials and you're looking for, like I said, that depth of experience, it really comes down to what are you trying to enable? Is it just that they're highly certified in cloud or AI or another aspect of a technology that you would like to use? Or can they show consistent, reliable results using a specific product? So, for example, in data scientists, sometimes they'll over rotate and become Python experts. And now my company needs to deploy a model using R. Well, my Python expert is no longer useful to me. I'm now paying, several six-figure dollar amounts to have someone who's a Python expert, and I need to deploy an R because ultimately that's where the client's environment works. So now I have to go
Yeah.
have an R specialist on top of it. Well, now I've doubled my data scientist budget because instead of getting someone who had just consistently deployed projects in both, now I have someone who's over rotated, over specialized, and it's very easy to over engineer a solution in terms of people, just as easy as it is to do it with technology.
That's a very strong point, Stephen. That's totally understandable. Now, Stephen, I'm pretty much sure, like going with your experience, that you've given multiple sales pitches. So, Stephen, I
Yeah.
just wanted to understand, like, what are the concise differences that you're able to, that you would that you would like to give when you're giving a presentation to an American sports team? Because I'm a huge sports fan, and even when it comes to NFL or MLB, I don't understand the sports really well, but I would really like to look at their success stories, or read about them, or anecdotes. So, like, what goes on when you're giving a presentation to an American sports team and to that of a European road authority department? So what's the basic difference?
Yeah, and I think that the basic difference that it comes down to is highly cultural. And it's cultural in the way that an American sports team and an American business are not as far apart as they might like to think. If we were looking at, for example, the Houston Astros versus Bank of America, the focus on strategic elements, business initiatives, and return on investment in terms of what they want to see, all the fireworks of doing a technology review or a deal process or consultative selling are going to be very similar. Whereas a European road authority or government agency in Europe has a huge focus on returning taxpayer value dollar to dollar. So the main difference is in almost every American presentation, you're having to show multiple dollars returned per dollar spent. And in a European presentation, you're trying to show that the dollar for dollar value is always there at the minimum. They're more concerned with the technicalities and the minimums than they are with the maximums, like the American teams and American companies are always about maximizing benefit, and the Europeans are always about minimizing risk.
Why do you think that, the Europeans are, very much keen about minimizing the benefits? Is that, I mean, part of their tradition, or like, something has, come in interim, like, in recent times? What do you think?
I think that there's a cultural focus on making the right decision versus making the best choice. And the idea that, if in a European culture of if we bought a better product, but it created any problems, then we didn't truly buy a better product. Is that reality? In their mindset, it's like, okay, but the harmony of everyone working together, the flow of what we're trying to do has been disturbed. And that's more important than what was actually delivered in the end goal. If we could deliver the same or less result with more harmony, then we've achieved our goal.
That's really interesting, I mean, this is the first time that, I've just got the understanding, because I mean, earlier, I was very much fascinated about understanding, like, how does the business function? And, the key point that I would like to, mention it out to you, I've actually done MBA as well. So I moved from the business thing to, I mean, I've just moved to the management side, to the tech side. So these were the things which I even learned. There was one subject which I had was business logic. So probably, so there I used to know about, how are the American firms, how are the European firms. So, that time I just had the idea, but now you have given me a complete overview of it. So that really, really sums it up, Stephen, totally.
Yeah, there've been a lot of books written on culture and how people interact. I think that we're moving into the hyper-personalized phase of business interactions. I have people on my team, for example, that have personalities that fit better into the European model. They're much more harmonious. They're worried about the collective good. And that gives us a diversity of thought that helps us to better approach everyone and to realize that, you have to individualize that approach with every person that you meet and make sure you're talking to them the way that they want to be spoken to.
Perfect. That's a remarkable insight, Stephen. So, Stephen, now, now as we go forward, like, Stephen, I wanted to understand, like, what is your take on consultative selling, VAR sales and LAR sales? Like, how do you, categorize them all together?
Yeah, so I think the consultative selling is really the table stakes of selling these days. You have to be able to present not just the solution and the pains and the benefits, but you have to go beyond that to, like we just talked about, hyper personalizing to the buyer, making sure that you're aligned with them and collaborating with them on what's important to them. And when we look at that in the terms of VAR sales and LAR sales, so VAR sales are working with regional partners, managed service providers, people in the area that are working to provide value to their clients, but they're not necessarily working nationally or globally. When we look at LAR sales in the United States, we're looking at really CDW, SHI are the major at that point. And that's more of a commodity-based approach. If you're reaching out to CDW or SHI, you're saying, I'm going to buy X, produce vendors for me as a client, and I've done my own research and I'll decide who I'm going to go with, but I trust my CDW SHI rep to tell me all the ins and outs of these different vendors. The VAR sales are much more, I'm bringing in a VAR rep, or that VAR rep is bringing in me, and they're not bringing in multiple people necessarily, maybe 2, maybe 3 max, but it's about delivering the best value to the client. Whereas the LAR seller is about delivering the best value to the LAR. So it's really about bringing that in and saying, like, okay, this is where we work best. This is where, we get the maximum benefit. The client's going to benefit from the LAR's experience with all these different vendors. They're going to cut out a lot of vendors working with a LAR that are not just going to be able to deliver on the product, but you're going to get down to the top 3. And it's going to become a commodity discussion as opposed to an actual added value discussion. And it's going to be much more like an RFP selection process than it is actually sitting down with a client from someone in my position, showing them that what goes above and beyond the sale is what I'm going to deliver to you and how I'm going to add value to this process. And that can exist in a LAR sale. It's just much more rare. It's much more likely to happen in a VAR sale than it is at a LAR level.
So, Stephen, like, as you were just giving the overview of all, about the three, so, like, which one do you prefer the most, the VAR sales or the LAR sales? Like, what do you choose from that?
Completely honestly, I prefer all sales. I prefer done deals. Ultimately, to me, it's about the maximum value to the client. Wherever I can deliver the maximum value to the client is where I want to be, because at the end of the day, the more value you deliver, the more the client trusts you, the more you build that relationship, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to consolidate things for them, streamline operations, move things beyond just a one-off process into a more collected and concise and resilient outcome for them and downstream. And ultimately, everyone goes to work wanting to make the maximum amount of impact that you can make, and enabling multiple companies to make multiple levels of impact on their clients and improve their lives and improve their experiences with technology. I mean, that's exactly what we're all hoping for. And I want to be where I can make the most impact. If that's in a LAR sale, that's fantastic. But if that's just me talking with an individual and improving my local community, that's fantastic as well. And I want to be there for it.
Amazing. That's a great point, to to be noting about. So now, I mean, Stephen, I've really heard that you have donned multiple hats, and I see a lot of versatility in your LinkedIn profile. So one of them happens to be that in your tenure, you have acted as a subject matter expert, an SME, a trainer for Salesforce and Salesloft. So like what were the things that you carried out that led to a 40% in, I mean, let's say a 30% increase in revenue across the entire sales team? Like what did you envision on that note?
Yeah, so it started organically in helping a few individuals, and then realizing that the time management on that just wasn't functional, and I needed to scale it up to a training session. After a couple training sessions, we enhanced not just the adoption of the tool, but the capability of use of the tools, and ultimately the sales experience for everyone in terms of getting results out of those tools. And that's why we saw that 30% increase in sales. The important factor is that from this to me is that you should never leave an individual struggling. And by focusing on really driving the adoption of technology, which is where, as a vendor, you see it more often than not. You come in, you implement a technology solution for a company, they don't adopt it, they don't get the results that they're expecting or that you promised. And some of that comes down to that internal process and culture. And the one thing that separates collaborative selling from everything else is sticking around to make sure that the product gets used well and delivered. And that's internal clients and external clients. So if we're all as a team working together, using everything the best that we can, of course the company is going to succeed, but also the end clients are also we're going to benefit from making that part of our process for the end users as well, of what we sell and what we're driving into those tech stacks, and making sure that it goes. The least used tool is the least beneficial tool. So,
it becomes much valuable,
works.
When it is least used, it becomes much valuable, and then we start getting to know the meaning about it and how we could use it in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's always about making sure that you justify a purchase with production. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. That's that's the absolute litmus test. Once it goes to production, and if we don't have any bugs, I'm telling it from the point of a QA, because I worked as a QA in my previous company. So, for us, we used to always wonder, okay, when it goes to production, things have to be smooth. If they're
Yeah.
smooth, then we have won it. If the production is, if there are bugs in that, then okay, we are questioned, we are answerable to that, and we have to again get back to the drawing board.
Yeah, absolutely. It came up in a conversation I had with a former QA last night, that there are two instances where you move something to production and you get no warnings. And one is that, what you did worked flawlessly. And the other is that what you did wasn't impactful. No one's using it. So, you know,
Yeah,
and the ultimate of that was, you see these companies, they'll build out a beautiful feature for a product.
yeah.
And then because their end users are so large, they sell to so many enterprises and things like that, maybe 2 or 3 enterprises pick up that feature and they use that to go back and justify the development of the product, even though they could have developed a product that impacted 80% of their clientele. But because it impacted 2 or 3 of their largest clients, they're like, oh, thank God we developed that product. It's like this other feature would have impacted them and everyone else that you serve. So this this idea of like the short-term gain versus long-term gain in product development, to me, is really important to hammer in on, like, where do we make not just the most impact, but the broadest impact for the most people, and then worry about quality assurance.
I mean, yeah, that's totally agreeable, Stephen. I
Yeah,
mean, because whenever it goes into production, the QAs always used to wait. I mean, I was a former QA, so I used to always wait. Okay, what's the thing going to be? I hope we just
right,
paid the the right amount of work that we did. When there are no bugs, we're like, oh, good, everything has
yeah,
just passed, and we're out of danger zone, I would say.
yeah. I think you enter a whole new danger zone of thinking that the product is flawless.
Yeah, and that
Yeah,
gives me that confidence, and wow, we just pulled it off. A lot of things,
right.
we have written a lot of test cases, a lot of test scenarios. Okay, and
Yeah,
finally we're in the right zone then.
yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, perfect, Stephen. So now, Stephen, this is something that is going to give you a lot of happiness, and it's going to be a moment of pride for you. I mean, I just wanted to know, Stephen, like now, you're still having that good feeling when I'm before I'm trying to get that thing straight. So, Stephen, like,
Yeah.
what was your feeling back then, like when you were declared as the very first winner of the Citrix Rise Empathy Award? And Stephen, can you just
Yeah.
give me a brief overview of what exactly that award is?
Mhm. So that award is a recognition for having empathy towards coworkers, leaders in the organization, and the clients at Citrix, and driving um, results in that collaborative way. Um, Now, I was actually really kind of thrown for a loop, like shocked and confused when I was nominated for that award and received it, because I was in front of all of my peers. No one had told me that that was happening. I had no advance warning, and it was the first one for the company. So it was it was really it was a really weird moment for me, but it gave me a lot of it gave me a pause to emphasize. I think what it did more than anything was it helped me to realize that was somewhere I should be putting more focus, which I'd never thought of awards as that process. I always thought of awards as like the thing you get and then you stop. Like I did
Obviously
it.
not, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, I did it. I did it. We're a champion now. Like there's nothing left to do. But really, I realized that the point of awards is not to win the award. It's to encourage people to win more of the same. Um, and
Yeah.
so and that change in perception is why I was proud to be the first to win it, but I am even happier that I wasn't the last to win that award.
But I mean, your award was a perfect curtain raiser for many talented people who came about and who were declared as a winner. So, Stephen, like back then, what was the speech that you gave? I mean, did you
Mhm.
give any inspirational speech to your fellow workers? Like, I mean, how did that
Yeah,
go about?
it would have been hard to give a speech on empathy from the position of winning an award, but I think my main focus was that, again, it's completely impossible to win that award without other people. And so my initial response was just, hey, this wouldn't have been possible without everyone that I worked with in regards to the training and our clients and the leadership and accepting that and deciding that I was going to be the recipient of that award. The main focus for me in everything that I do is the person on the other side, whether that's the other side of a screen, the other side of a desk, that what they need and what has to happen going forward happens with them. Um, that's where all good decisions are made, is in focusing on other people.
That's a very clear cut and a perfect way of summarizing it. I mean, I can just take an inspiration from you, Stephen. If I go to that stage, and definitely, Stephen, I'll be the first one to thank you, and I would say Stephen was the person who gave me this inspiration to come up with this quote. So for sure, Stephen, that's gonna be happen. That's gonna happen for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
Perfect.
Like I said, it's an honor to be here, and I can't wait to see who you have on next for sure.
For sure, Stephen. That's definitely. But Stephen, I mean, too bad. I mean, the podcast is not yet done. I mean, we're still
Sure.
going ahead with it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
perfect, perfect. Stephen, I'm just having a great. I'm just loving the conversation with you, and the way you're summarizing it, and a lot of things that I'm learning through this thing. So now, Stephen, now coming to the closing of deals. So,
Mhm.
like Stephen, what were the key strategies that you employed, in closing different enterprise clients who were belonging to different domains? Like, what were
Sure.
the things that you used up?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that consultants go about working with enterprise clients. I think sometimes we get hung up on qualification, which qualification is really a fancy way of saying that it's disqualification. So you're saying, I want to work with this person, but do they meet this criteria? Are we actually going to be working together? So it's a matter of time prioritization when we look at qualification. When we look at it in a different way of saying, what are the buyer's qualification methods, right? What are they looking to figure out? And we sit more on their side of the table. Now we start to see that, because the disqualification goes both ways, am I meeting what they want? Are we in the right time cycle for what they want to accomplish? Are they locked into 2 more years of a contract? But I think where people need to change their focus on that is just making sure that not only are you focused on how you're working with the buyer, how you fit their qualification methods, but making sure that when you do finally go forward, that both sides have everything that they need and that both sides are completely comfortable and that everything is aligned and that maximum value is achieved. And you can't do that with a focus on just closing the sale. The focus has to be on the next 3-5 years of that relationship. And for salespeople, that often means that you may not be around to see the fruits of your labor. It's there's an old phrase about, when is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the next best time? Now. And if I want apples, I may have to wait 20 years. I may not get the apples. My kids may get the apples. So you're not always planting seeds for yourself. You might be planting seeds for the company. You might be planting seeds for the future. And personally, I just think having a long-term strategy in everything that you're doing sets you up for bigger goals, sets you up for bigger aspirations, and sets you up for more desire and motivation to get it done and to ultimately have an impact. And we all want to make an impact. So make the biggest one that you can.
That's a superb way of understanding it. Now, Stephen, in your tenure, like, was there any case where a success story kind of thing where you have decided a long term goal or a long term strategy? Like, can you just tell me like where did the client come from and who and which domain was he part of?
So I think I misunderstood that question. Do you mind walking me back through it for a second?
Yes,
Sorry.
definitely, definitely. So, Stephen, I was just saying that, you were talking about the long-term strategy with the client,
Hmm.
when you're closing a deal.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to understand like a success story, where you met this client and, he was, you had a good rapport and a camaraderie with him throughout
Hmm.
your entire tenure. So I just wanted
Hmm.
to understand like which domain did that, client belong from and which region was he from?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been so many stories like this, so I'm trying to narrow it down in my head. But I was working with a client who I'm going to keep the business confidential because of how this worked. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
long-term strategy of it centered on AI and fraud detection. And the important aspect of that to me is we worked on the deal together. Ultimately, both of us are not at either company anymore. But that client relationship between my previous company and his previous company still exists. They're still producing artificial intelligence models in the finance sector, and it ultimately has grown beyond just monitoring their client base to make sure that their clients weren't engaged in fraud, to moving to better supporting their client base to drive engagement and increase referrals. Um, the great thing about business aligned technology is that a lot of the goals are similar, but the technology, the operations, the processes vary. So you might put in place a new service ticketing program with the goal of improving end user experience. But the ultimate goal of improving end user experience is creating a a I don't know what the word is, but like sort of a beautiful upward trend, a crescendo of client satisfaction that leads to client referrals. Well, whether you do that with a service ticketing experience, or whether you do that with AI, or whether you do that with streamlining internal hardware and operations with the cloud, the ultimate goal is the same: improving the reputation of your company, improving the happiness of your clients, and ultimately improving the profit to the shareholders. So when you have those broad strategic goals and then you understand the minutia, you can work backwards to say, this is what everyone wants. How do we get there? What's slowing us down in our company? And what do I provide to people that gets them to that result?
Amazing, amazing. So, Stephen, before we, close this podcast session, so we're just going to go take a very lighter route. So, we're just going to come up with a rapid fire round. So,
Sure.
we were just talking too much technical. We were talking about, your journey. So I just want to, just make it in a very, very, fun way.
Mhm.
So, Stephen, like, what is the go-to place that, that you would like to, take me when I visit your native place?
So when you say my native place, I'm thinking between where I am now and where I grew up. So I'll give you both.
Surely.
If you were to come hang out with me here in Raleigh, North Carolina, I would take you to the Pit Barbecue because you have to. It's like mandatory in Raleigh, North Carolina, to go to the Pit Barbecue.
Okay.
Across the street from that is the Videri Chocolate Factory, which is some of the best dark chocolate in the United States. You'd have to go to Belgium to get better chocolate, uh,
Oh,
and that's just because Belgium's been doing it longer. Um, and then if we were to go back to my hometown area around Lexington, Kentucky, um, I would I would want to take you to get your first Ale 8 soda. Is what I would want to, because it's its own experience, and people love it or hate
oh,
it. And it's one of those things that you can't get it in very few places, and so it's just one of those like rare tastes on earth. It's like having your first dragon fruit. It's like, oh, I didn't know this was real.
oh, wow. That's a very different experience then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing, amazing. So, Stephen, like, what is your favorite country in Europe, which you love
Mhm.
to visit always?
Yeah, so there's quite a few countries in Europe that I love to visit. My favorite place to go is Barcelona, Spain. The city was has several aspects that are designed by Gaudi, and it's just beautiful flowing architecture and mosaics. And you're probably never going to experience architecture that feels more like it was designed for human beings to be alive in it than in Barcelona.
No, really. I
Yeah,
think the thing that makes Barcelona alive is FC Barcelona football team, because the city just craves for them like anything.
yeah. The amount of love that Barcelonans have for FC Barcelona cannot be overestimated. It is
Absolutely not.
every second street corner is selling jerseys. The kids are in the street kicking soccer balls. Um, you know, it's something that you'd love to see. That sort of like real adoption of community around sport. Honestly,
Truly, truly. And I'm a huge Barcelona fan, and this actually makes me want to go to Barcelona and buy a jersey for myself.
yeah, absolutely. It's also one of the top food destinations in the world. You'll probably there's there's only a few other areas that I would say you'll have a better meal than Barcelona. But
Really.
definitely top of the line. Yeah, there's
Perfect, perfect.
there's nothing to not love.
Then yeah, then probably it's going to be in my wish list, because you've just given me that idea and that recommendation. So for sure, Stephen, I'm not going to reject this.
All right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
So Stephen, who's your favorite pop singer of all time, or let's say rock
Uh,
singer?
yeah, Freddie Mercury, hands down.
Freddie Mercury. Wow, Queen, right?
Yeah, Queen. He has the most vocal range of probably any singer that's ever existed, and yeah, there's no one on the planet that doesn't know the words to "We Will Rock You," so it's kind of hard to
Yeah,
argue.
yeah, truly, truly. That's there for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, everywhere, even if you go to, I mean, I just been to Malaysia, and I've just seen people, performing, I mean, a rock kind of a scenario there, especially
yeah,
in a gated community. I've been to a place called Cyberjaya, which is in Kuala Lumpur. So I've
hmm
just seen these teenagers, or let's say people of my age, they're just singing "We Will Rock You" and all the other songs. So I feel that, music is like an international language. It's spoken everywhere. Or
yeah,
let's say, expressed
absolutely.
everywhere.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anywhere in the world that didn't have music and didn't have some form of mathematics, and I think they go hand in hand for sure.
Totally, totally. That's completely agreeable on that. So, Stephen, and now coming to the other one. So, Stephen,
hmm
what's your all-time favorite movie of, that you keep on watching every time?
Yeah, no one likes this movie except me. It's called The Shadow with
The
Alec
Shadow.
Baldwin. Yeah, and it's based on an old 1940s radio play. And the character is actually the inspiration for Batman. And people
Oh,
don't even know who it is nowadays, which I
okay
find
then.
hilarious. Yeah.
Then I
Like,
think, listeners, then probably all the Batman fans out there, you just
yeah,
need to have a look at this movie then.
go have a look at the movie. I will give you some warnings that it is not the most sensitive movie on the planet. It was done in a different time.
Oh God.
Yeah,
Then probably I have to check it out.
yeah, because again, the subject matter of the movie was the 1940s,
Yeah.
but it is one of, in my opinion, Alec Baldwin's better roles outside of Jack Donaghy from 30 Rock. So,
Hands down to that. That's perfect.
yeah,
But too bad, Stephen, because I'm not completely into horror. I like watching action
yeah,
movies, or
yeah.
let's
This
say
is this
sometimes,
isn't
yeah.
this is an action movie. It
Okay.
just I would say that there's some major cultural misunderstandings of Mongolia, Genghis Khan, and some of those aspects. And if you can get past that, then it's pretty good. But you'll see a direct correlation between this character, Batman, and Marvel's The Iron Fist with Danny Rand.
A lot.
None of those characters exist without the Shadow originally back in the 1940s. So take it as
Wow.
history
Yeah.
and try to enjoy it from that perspective.
So I think I can just title Shadow as the OG, because this is the word everyone is saying, the OG.
Yeah, yes, the original gangster, almost literally. In fact, he literally is the original gangster of comic books.
Wow. I mean, how come I have not known about this? Because I'm a huge Batman fan, and when I was even doing a
Yeah,
background check about Batman, it never, struck me that, okay, there's a character based on that.
Well, yeah, when you think about the evolution of these characters, Tony Stark doesn't exist without Batman. Batman doesn't exist without the Shadow. And there's a slight argument to be made that the Shadow and the Phantom were in tandem because of the time period of the radio plays, but it's just there's an evolution of the idea of someone with a lot of money coming to save us.
Splendid. I mean, so now heading on for the final question of the rapid fire, Stephen. So, Stephen, what is your favorite street food?
Oh, I mean, chicken peanut satay, hands down.
That's pretty simple, but yeah, good.
Pretty simple. You can find it almost everywhere. Someone sells chicken on a stick all over the world, and so I'm never disappointed.
That's a very, that's a comfort dish, I would say, Stephen, according to you, right?
Absolutely. Quick,
All right,
simple, and always beautiful. Like, 100%.
Amazing. Perfect, Stephen. And all right, Stephen, it was such a lovely, time to converse with you through this medium, and it was so much fun to have you part of this podcast initiative. Thank you so much for being part of this initiative and taking time from your busy schedule. And I really learned a lot from your end, and I really feel, Stephen, that you're my inspiration. The way you were talking about the way you, turned down the obstacles and made, a route for them for the things to come. That was really, really nice. The major thing, since I happen to be a sports fan, I just love the way you just gave the difference between the way you give a presentation to an American sports team and to that of a European Road Authority department, and the way you're talking about how you're able to balance multiple hats, like being an SME or let's say a trainer for Salesforce and Salesloft, and the way you have encouraged your colleagues to be the best that they are. So totally, salute to you, sir, Stephen, for that.
I really appreciate it, Gil. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, listeners, before we conclude our podcast episode, this is an open request to all to all the industry leaders out there who are hearing to this podcast. If you have any interesting journey, key useful insight, which you would like to share through my podcast episode, you could reach out to me on my email ID, akhil.namluri55@gmail.com, or you could message me on my WhatsApp number that's present on my profile page of the podcast. Or there's a new option right now. You could, DM me directly on my Instagram page, the TechnoSpace Podcast, and whatever it is, I would get back to you as soon as possible. And who knows, it's going to be you next time. I mean, the industry leaders who are listening out to this. So on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We will be back with another podcast episode very soon with another industry leader. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Stay tuned. Au revoir.